Hello. This is AJT500 slash Track 98 slash Eloise Wonderwise slash Hilo, and this is the Impalement, I guess, discussion video, Fire Light Edition, because those are the only two that exist right now. So, I brought this up on a stream the other day where I was thinking about making an Impalement video just to kind of talk about it, but I felt like there wasn't like a ton to talk about, but people seemed interested in it regardless. So I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, I guess there is some stuff that I could talk about for like basic grid composition for fire and light right now, at least from what I've been seeing and using. And I haven't really made one of these discussion yap videos in a while, so I decided to run the camera, even though there's not a camera, run the recording, I guess, and go through it. So I wrote up some notes as we do on this channel. Ooh, yeah, that's a lot of notes. That's a lot of notes. So I ran out some notes. I want to do a couple tests that I want to just show off and just talk about some grid compositions. So I'm just going to go through some of this stuff. I have a little baby amount of Magna related stuff at the very end, but I'll put some timestamps for stuff. But again, this is only going to be for fire and light. I'm not going to really even speculate what everybody else is going to get right now. I'm just going to focus on what we have in the game at this current point. So this is also another one of those like script-ish videos where I have written down most of my points already, but I do have some stuff to show in the game. So first of all, basic grids. So I have two grids here. This is the fire one, basic setup of a grid here, and then I have the light version right here, which is a basic setup of a grid. Basic grids, both are shown with Mana Diver because while Light does play Ogi-based jobs for high-level content, its Impalement is more likely to be dropped in those scenarios, and so those comps become irrelevant for this discussion. Both of these elements play Mana Diver 98% of the time as of right now, so I pretty much made this, and this part right now is just for Primal, so I pretty much made these as assuming you're going to be playing in optimal or as close to optimal light and fire Mana Diver build in a normal grid. These are what they base look like. So, as you can see, fire has more space than light for various reasons, but the main reason is because skill damage is busted. So as you can see for fire, right here, this is pretty much the base grid, but there are still two slots open that you can kind of mess around with. Light, on the other hand, has pretty much no room to change anything. This is literally just the light grid. This is just what you run for the vast majority of content in light right now, and there's not a lot of change to it. The reason why, like I said, is mostly because of skill damage being busted as crap, and I'll get into that. The Opus key can give skill amp and skill cap specials, this meaning the Sagacity Opus key, but doesn't give skill supplemental, and 100 to 200k skill supplemental is really strong. So pretty much what I'm saying with this is essentially fire gets a get out of jail free card. That's essentially what it is. The thing about it right now is skill damage is, for the most part, especially in both of these elements, more busted than auto attack damage. So both of these elements are chasing skill damage supplemental, but the Opus Sagacity key only gives amp and cap. It does not give supplemental. This forces light to have to still want to take Nihons, even though it wants to also use its impalement weapon. Whereas fire, on the other hand, not only can it just straight up run extremity key, but it gets its sagacity key from this, and then it also gets the supplemented skill damage on this as well. So it essentially kills two birds with one stone in this weapon, which means it opens up your Opus to something else, and it opens up more slots because you don't need to spam like two Kumbira spears here. Instead, you can just take your impalement weapon, so you're not as tied on slots. That's why fire is just in general more free right now than light when it comes to space in a grid. Now, UL Katana is a direct upgrader for Kumbira Spear, but a Kumbira Spear can be used as a surrogate for a missing UL until UL is obtained, but the damage will still be lower. One UL Katana is still base requirements for a standard build, and two is most likely optimal, but the second is still a bit of a luxury for non-whales / Ellie Lords / min-maxers. One Basara Katana, on the other hand, is pretty much a direct upgrade over an Eden, but an Eden can still be used in conjunction with the Basara, and a Basara katana doesn't have any HP requirements. Two Basara katana is almost never needed outside of Ura use, aka if you're playing like Luchador or Sumabito. In light, and even one can be a bit hard to slot in. I'd say one bare minimum, but two is extremely luxury and can still fall behind. Still, Jesus Christ, can't talk. Can still fall behind when you're focusing more on skill damage in light, depending on the comp. So if you're playing something like Vikala, specifically Ilnot, if you're bringing Ilnot, skill damage is almost, if you're doing like Ilnot Mana Diver, skill damage is almost always going to beat out your auto attacks, which means your skill damage is much more important than your auto attacks. And then example, two Basaras is 3% behind on Celeste M3 full auto versus two Nihon Harps, and my Celeste M3 doesn't even use Futsu. So what I mean by this is this. So this is my Celeste M3, right? If I take this comp has Vikala, Mana Diver MC, Vikala, Ilnot, and Funfun. If I take this exact same comp and I swap out one of these Nihon Harps for a second Basara, that grid is 3% behind this grid right here because skill damage is just that busted, even though my auto attacks are stronger, and I'm getting the defense shred from the second Basara. It's just not enough to keep up with all the skill damage that's going out from all these Seeking characters. It's just not enough to keep up. So that's what I mean when I say the Celeste M3 full auto example. So if you don't use Ura, I would highly debate going for a second, especially if you're not a whale or a light lord. Because of this, Fire gets access to more free slots because everyone wants skill damage and it's more accessible on newer weapons, aka Impalement and Fire, than in Light. This causes Light to still want to take up to two Nihon Harps whenever possible, including wanting their Impalement, so it's very tight on space. Fire also gets more space because it cares less about getting to 100% crit. Getting to 100% is nice if possible, because its Exalto does not operate off crit amp. Going for 100% crit is more of a luxury than a requirement. Fire also has more useful weapons that just have crit on them, mainly Finny Staff. So if we go look at Finny Staff, you use this joint in literally like every single Mana Diver thing you have, unless you just don't have Finny Staff, and this thing just has big crit on it. It just has big crit on it, which is extremely helpful for getting you to crit. If you see in this grid right here, this grid already has 89% crit in it. I don't even remember if this has Michael in it. Okay, it does have Michael. So it has Michael and it has Wilness, but it has nothing else besides this and then these two. That's it for the crit, and it's already at 89%, and I have two slots completely open in the grid. It's kind of gross. It's kind of gross. So we're at mainly Finny Staff, and then a multitude of standard banner weapons that also play into it. Ball Katana, Abbey Axe, I don't know how to say this guy's name, Laverita Sword, as well as Mugen Swords for offensive and defensive play. All this together with their Exalto make it easy to bare minimum hit a high enough crit to be consistent without having to care if crit doesn't hit because there's no amp on the Exalto. So pretty much what I'm saying by this is both of these elements have a crit based Exalto. They have crit here. So this has crit, and then Light also has crit on theirs, right? The thing about it though is Light, their main selling point of their Exalto is the amplified crit, whereas Fire, their main selling point of the Exalto is Echo. So the thing about it is, in Light, if you do not hit 100% crit, any hit you don't crit not only is doing less crit damage just in general because you're not critting, but you're also not playing into your Exalto because you're not amping. Whereas in Fire, if you don't crit, yeah, you're not critting, but you're still getting all your echoes from your Exalto. You're still playing into your Exalto regardless. So you don't have to always be at 100% crit in Fire. It's just more of a luxury as opposed to Light, where you almost always want to be at 100% crit. So you have to focus more on crit in Light and always being at 100%. Whereas in Fire, you kind of don't really care. I can finish this grid, these two slots, and get to 100% crit, or I could not. That's totally fine. and you can still operate effectively in fire, but it's not the same way in light. That's what I mean with that statement. So, going on, fire also has a bit more space because as an element right now, fire doesn't need to worry about TA as much as light. High value fire characters have GTA or just generally high TA built in. Percy has GTA, Zeta has GTA, Wamdis has kinda GTA. She can start with GTA with her S1. She can then press S1 again, and then once she gets this, she can also get guaranteed triple attack. She also, Wamdis is also staff specialty, and you run staff Ultima for the most part with MC, so she can get very high TA off of that just for free. Neza, if you have 3 primals in the party, he can get a guaranteed TA. UL can help your whole team get guaranteed TA. Ragazzo has guaranteed TA, and Finny has a 30% TA buff. So a lot of these characters have TA buffs, where a lot of light does not. A lot of these characters do not have guaranteed triple attack just off rip, which means you really need to push for it in your grid. Another issue about this too is a lot of these characters are not the same type of specialty as Mana Diver. They're not all staff, so that or staff dagger, which makes it a little bit harder. So something like Ilnat, she's only gun. Vikala, she's axe and melee. So you're essentially on all these characters except Fum Fum, which ironically enough, Fum Fum's the one that has the buff that just comes on her when she comes in. Everyone else doesn't get an Ultima. They don't get access to this, and they don't get access to any guaranteed triple attack buff just innately either. So they're kind of just getting cooked on TA, which means you have to focus more on trying to get everyone TA in this grid as much as possible when you're already strapped for space, and it becomes kind of an issue. Fire grid pretty much has 2 open slots in most standard grids. These can be whatever you need, but most common combinations will be a Percy sword, so right in there. Your last 2 slots will usually either be like a Percy sword and an Abby axe, so that you can actually hit like the axe requirement right there for the Percy sword. And then, what else is in here? Second, UL Katana and Ball Katana or Xaba. Very strong. Oh yeah, I need to make a point about this. So right here, the second UL Katana and the second UL Katana / Ball Katana or Xaba is a very strong, even without Wamda's S1 for free skill damage, can still push this comp to the top with a lot of TA for everyone. And there's another comp too. I can't remember what the other comp was. What was the other comp? The other comp was oh yeah, you could do Abby Axe and UL Katana. That was the last one. So what I mean by this is, for the most part, your final slots look kind of like this. Oh no, okay, I know what the other one was. I don't. Maybe I took it out of these notes. The other combination was Icarus weapon. Icarus weapon, and I guess you could do UL Katana or Abby axe. So UL Katana, Abby axe. If you wanted to hit guaranteed triple attack. So let's look at the main thing I want to look at actually is the Icarus one, which I don't know. I swear that was in the notepad, but I don't know where it went. So anyway, the main thing is you usually go for the Icarus sword because you want the HP on your Wamdis, right? So you'll see right here, if you do a composition like this, right? You'll see just this is another point of never believe the in-game calculator. You actually have to test stuff. So we'll go to the training dummy real quick, and we'll just take this in here. And not everyone's gonna press skills in here, and that's okay. We just want to see like basic damage. So I'm just gonna do this. Also note how that Orologia just did 28,000. Also notice that right now Wamdis has her buff up from having over 60k HP, and we're just gonna let this play out. And and I'll let them attack once, and then we'll stop here. Okay, so 2024 at the end, and there was a 24 mil nuke of Orologia. So 248 right here, right? And this was the ending damage. Now, we can swap this, and I'll show you about the calculator thing again. So we're actually going to end up still with 100% crit if we do this, right? We're going to go with the ball katana this time instead of the Abby axe. And then we're going to swap this to a second UL katana. Now you'll see that my damage has dropped down. What is this? 300k doing this in the calculator, but we're just going to go back in here. We're just going to go back in here, and I'm just going to show you the damage with this instead. And you'll notice with this composition, Womdus actually doesn't have her 60k. And you also notice on that Orologia, it was up to 28 mil now instead of 24 mil. And we'll just let this play out again. I'll also stop right here. 2-6. 2-6. Interesting. So this got up to 2-6. And this is the ending damage. So if we go back to the trial battles, you can see here 248 versus 2-6. Now this, not only did the damage show as being less, but Womdus didn't even have her S1 buff up. Imagine if you just pressed that button as well. What I'm trying to tell you with this test is just simply, not only is the defense shred good, but the supplemental damage of the skill damage is incredibly strong. It's incredibly strong. And the other thing that is a very big boon about a build like this is that this ball katana also plays into multi-attack for everyone. So this helps out someone like Zeta if she doesn't have her buff up, or Womdus when she doesn't have her buff up, or MC when they're not fully buffed as well. So this is just a whole lot of TA for free, and you'll still see in here that it's still at 100% crit. So this is an incredibly strong build right here. I actually think when it comes to bursting, something like this is probably just the best. This is very strong. This is also pretty much exactly what you use for PBHL, and that's kind of how the logic for the PBHL goes as well. So, but even then, you may not even need something like Icarus Sword. You just need to kind of play around with it. But all that's to say, skill damage just busts his crap. Skill damage just busts his crap. So again, for these open slots for fire, pretty much the combinations you're looking at are Percival Sword, Abby Axe. I guess you could do, well, you can't even really do Percy Sword. You have to do Abby Axe because you need to be able to hit. If you're going to use Percy Sword, you have to use Abby Axe to hit the 4 axes. You have to do that if you're going to do the Percy Sword. But you can do second UL Katana and Ball Katana. You can do second UL Katana and Abby Axe. You can do like Icarus Sword. I guess you could also do Icarus Sword and second UL Katana. You could do Icarus Sword and Abby Axe. Those are all different combinations that you can put in these two slots, but these two slots are very flexible for what you can put in here because you're living on cloud 9 with the skill damage supplemental. It's honestly free when it comes to fire. Your grid is very flexible because you have 2 free slots at pretty much any given time. Okay, so that's pretty much fire out of the way. So now let's talk about light. So light is very tight on space. Standard grid is pretty much mandatory grid because there are a few options you can change. You can swap a neon heart for a Cosmos katana. So in here you can swap one of these neon harps to one of these katanas, any of these Cosmos katanas, because they give you the garrison, but they also give you, again, you're chasing this supplemental skill damage here. This is what you're looking for. So you're also chasing this, and I guess this cap. But you can swap that around if you need more defense or HP. A second Basara can take the place of a Nihon Heart, but as mentioned earlier with the Celeste M3 thing, it's less damage than two Nihons, assuming you have a highly skill damage focused team, aka Ilnot, specifically Ilnot, but Ilnot and Vakala definitely want skill damage for that. Two Basaras can be used together if you completely forgo crit and drop Exalto, requires Summer Mars, and only really used for PBHL full auto at the moment. So what I mean by that is this type of grid, wherever it is, this one. So this grid completely forgoes your Exalto, and completely forgoes 100% crit, and you just kind of ride out the Summer Mars free crit at the start, and you just kind of use that, and then once it falls off, it's just gone. But you can use something like this here, because if you just completely drop the Exalto, you can still keep your skill damage in here, and then you can also use the Impalement as well. But that's also whack because you're dropping your two Exaltos. If using Futsu Grid, it becomes a bit more whack because to keep 100% crit, you must still bring in a Noah Dagger, and unfortunately, Noah Dagger doesn't really do much in the current meta outside of bringing the crit. This puts you in a scenario where you either go with two Nihons or one Nihon and one Basara, but since Futsu already plays into skill damage, and again, Ilnot and Vikala exist, it's hard to justify the Basara over the extra skill damage of a second Nihon. So what I mean by that is when you bring in Futsu, Futsu is honestly really annoying for some of this stuff because Futsu does not play into really anything. It's just an extra weapon slot in an already super crowded grid. So essentially, to keep 100% crit in this grid, you have to keep this Noah Dagger in here with your two Exaltos, and then you need Sandolphin and your Summon in order to get to 100% crit. So you need like this line of weapons right here. You're gonna keep your two PNS, your Opus, your Ultima, and then you're gonna have your Futsu, which leaves you two slots. So you can either have one Basara and one Nihon Harp, or you can just keep two Nihon Harps right here. This is pretty much the grid that you're gonna have to run for Futsu. But again, like I said, if you're running something like Ilnot specifically, but Ilnot and Vikala, you probably want to stick to a grid like this as opposed to the Basaras, just because the skill damage is so powerful. What else do we have here? Okay, I was done with this. Ura comps are where Basara shines, though. Two katanas are usually optimal here since these comps care less about skill damage and focus on auto damage, and so there's more room. Also, Ura and Basara's auto amps do stack. Ura is normal attack amp, and Basara is normal attack amp special. So if we go to an Ura comp, over here, when you do Uracomp, you care way less about skill damage, which means you can drop Nihon Harps, which means you have way more space for Basara Katanas. And not only do you have more space for Basara Katanas, you also just can bring two. Two is like optimal there because you're really playing into the auto thing. And what I mean about the amp is on Ura, it has the Amplify Light Allies normal attack damage here, but Basara also has the same thing listed right here, but they are two different types of amp. If you go in here, you can see wherever they are. Here, you can see NA Amp. This one is from Ura, and then NA Amp Special is from technically it's from your Fall Zero key, but if you're not running that Fall Zero key, the Fall Zero key and the Impalements share the same type of amps. So this is coming from the Basara, this is coming from the Ura. So you get both of them. So overall, light is very tight on space because it desperately wants it desperately wants the supplemental on skill damage in most of its comps, and the Impalement doesn't help with that. As well as Light really needing 100% crit to play into its Exalto, there just really isn't a lot of room, and also because Light is so skill damage slash Ogi focus, Bizarre Katana, even when slotted in, doesn't make a ton of difference in most cases outside of the defense shred and multi-attack, but even the defense shred seems to fall behind the supplemental of the skill damage, and the multi-attack can be gained from the Nihon Harps as well. So pretty much what I'm saying is, even in a comp like what I showed before, where you have a comp like this versus a comp like this, the Basara weapon may just barely catch up to the double Nihons, even if you do this, and you're getting pretty much the exact same amount of TA from both of these, because this also gives the TA right here as well. The only way I could see Basara really pushing ahead of Nihon is if you were doing single-sided, but honestly in Light you don't really single-side a lot, to be honest. So that's the only way I could really see, because then you also just kind of get the multi-attack for free. But even then, you still have to pump so much into it, where you have to bring like Sandolphin and Luo Summon just to hit this 280% single-sided. So there are issues. There are issues with Light space. Light wants to do too much. It needs multi-attack. It needs skill. It needs autos. It needs like everything, and it needs crit. It needs all that stuff. It needs all that stuff, and it's kind of rough because it's being pulled in every single different direction possible, and it's honestly really rough to well, honestly, it's really not even that rough to build Light grids. It's hard to experiment with Light grids, because like I said, your standard is pretty much set in stone. There's really nothing to change on it, so it's very easy to build because there's no real alteration. But if you really want to mess around with stuff, almost everything you try is going to be less than just the standard build, because everything else is just worse by default. So that's the thing that kind of sucks about Light's building just in general. Alright, so I did say I had a little bit of an aside for Magna. So for Magna, these weapons can be used, but funnily enough, while they're about equal on the space, the usefulness, and by space I mean grid space, the usefulness of the Basara Katana is greater than the UL Katana. This is mostly because Fire has a direct counterpart in Magna in the form of the M3 axe that Light doesn't have for Basara's Katana. So, what I mean by that, I actually have two other parties here that are just purely, they are literally just basic Magna Mana Diver. So it's just literally a Colossus here, and then a Colossus Friend Summon, and then there's just a UL Katana. Now, if you see this here, if I actually swap this to a Colossus axe, my damage actually goes up. My damage actually goes up with this over the UL Katana. It actually goes up with this, and I tested this too. Your damage actually does go up with this. Because this one you do have the direct counterpart in the form of the big supplemental boost here. So it's not as much of a boon to get a UL Katana in here. You're kind of going for the defense shred, but the thing about it is, since you're not primal, you're not going to really boost the defense shred enough to really surpass this weapon in Magna. Whereas in Light does not really, and this one again, this also has just Luminara here and Luminara Friend Summon. Light does not have a direct counterpart to this supplement Light allies normal attack and this amplified normal attack. The only thing Light Magna really has is like this. You only really have this, and as you can see, the damage actually goes like way down on this. Although this does give you more multi-attack. This can give you more multi-attack because you do get so much trip off of this, but there's really nothing else to put here. Like if you put a Luminara sword, there's nothing that really contends with the Basara Katana in Magna, because there's nothing else that really has, like I said, there's no direct counterpart to a Basara Katana in Magna like there is a Colossus axe in Fire. So that being said, this usefulness of the Basara Katana could be lowered though if you're using an extremity key on your Opus in Magna, but opting for Sagacity with Basara Katana allows you to get skill damage and normal attack damage, whereas if you run extremity, you only get access to one of them. So pretty much what I'm just saying is if you have an Opus in here and you ran Sagacity, you're getting the amplified to skill damage and you're getting the amplified to normal attack from the Basara and the Opus. But if you run Extremity, it does lower the Basara, so it makes it less valuable for Magna, but you're essentially doubling up on normal attack and you're completely missing out on skill amp because there is no skill amp equivalent in Magna light. So you're kind of just cooking yourself if you don't take Sagacity. Uh, so where was I? Here. I'm still not sure I would recommend borrowing either of these weapons for Magna though. If you're thinking about doing that, just work on going Primal instead and use them there. But if you have a ridiculous abundance of copies, it could be used, and even then I'd say it's only really worth it in Light and not Fire. So pretty much what I'm saying is even though these could be a boon for you in Magna, I would not bar them for Magna. If you're gonna bar them, just go Primal. Just work on going Primal. Don't bar them just to buff your Magna. Especially because not only is Light the better one, but Light's Guild War just ended, so it's not even worth it. Just for Fire Guild War, just go farm your Colossus axes and you'll be okay. Or just go Primal and use UL Katana. So that's what I'm seeing so far for Magna. So closing statement. Overall, the Impalement series can be very strong, but as of right now, with only Fire and Light as reference, the skill damage focused weapons appear to be much stronger because the supplemental can't be obtained from the Opus keys, and the supplemental skill damage beats out the auto attack in most instances for both of these elements. It also helps a lot that the Fire grids overall flow better together than Light, so it makes their integration much easier to manage. But this is all also dependent on how an element's units play as well. It's just that right now in pretty much every element, skill damage is ridiculously powerful, and since everyone wants it, transitioning to a skill damage impalement just makes sense. So what I'm saying just in this closing statement is pretty much not only does Fire's grids just flow better than Light's, you just have more free space in general, but the main thing that you really want, pretty much every element wants right now, is skill damage. You want skill damage boosted weapons. That is where all the real big damage is coming from right now, is skill damage. So if you have a skill damage impalement, you're playing into what is essentially the 98% of the meta, which is like mana diver based comps in pretty much every single LE except like Taking Earth. Pretty much every other LE runs mana diver. Oh, I guess Dark if you run a Resh. But even then, if you have Zosimos, you're running Mana Diver too. So pretty much everybody is running Mana Diver. And I would even argue if you're playing Earth and you don't have Hunting, you're probably also running some form of Mana Diver. So pretty much every element right now is very, very skill damage focused, and skill damage just has so much more potential to do more damage than auto attacks because there's just straight up not enough auto attacks in the game. There's not enough auto attacks in the game, especially when you factor in the fact that sometimes some people don't even multi-attack, but they'll also send off like a 10-hit nuke after they attack every single time. You know, it's just like the skill damage really adds up, and that's the thing right now. Skill damage is the name of the game right now in pretty much every single element. So Fire just gets it really easy because their impalement plays directly into that, whereas Light, their impalement is kind of more based around Ura, to be honest. It's more based around Ura, and it's kind of borderline a filler weapon in anything else that's not Ura related. So that's pretty much how I feel about the Impalement weapons right now. We'll see how the rest of them come out. We still don't know if they're going to pull something like Exalto, where some of them just don't have skill damage or normal attack. They just have something weird on them. We don't know. But until we see that, this is just how I feel about the Fire and Light ones right now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I have for this video. Those are my thoughts on the Impalement. So thanks for watching. Thanks for the support as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.